So I would like to kind of resume with our music library by adding some new functionality to it with the time we have left today. Just before we do, I also want to say thanks for all of the feedback that you provided on the midterm survey. That's very helpful to me. And a couple of things that sort of came up in a number of comments that I wanted to just address. Yeah, okay. My display's gone to sleep. So the first thing I'll address is one of the comments I saw a fair bit from more than one student was the pace of the class is a bit fast, and you would appreciate it if I could maybe go a bit slower. That's fine with me. The only thing I ask is I can't necessarily read your face. Okay, I try to kind of take the temperature of the room and pay attention if people are following along. But if you need me to put code back up, or you need me to just to pause or explain something else again, please ask. Okay, I'll be responsive to that. But if no one's telling me, hold on, wait a minute, or asking questions, generally I'm assuming people are following. So if you're not following and you need more time to copy some code, or we need to look at something more in depth, that's totally fine, but please just let me know. Okay. The second thing that a number of students said is they'd like the ability, but they don't necessarily know how. They asked, well, how can I get more practice? You know, I'm coming to class, I'm doing this stuff in class, but how do I practice on my own? So if you want to do this, in the assignments tab, there's a folder here called optional project. This is not for grades. But this would be an application you could build on your own time. You could do it by yourself. You can do as much or as little as you like. You could also work with other people in the class if you wanted to. So here would be something you could do for practice using PHP and MySQL. You could build an online time tracker for a business. So imagine that this business, their employees are paid hourly and they bill all their clients by the hour. So you could build an application where a company could manage all of their clients, all of their projects, and at the end of each day, every employee would create a timesheet for that day, listing which projects they worked on, how many hours they worked, and a description of the work. And then there could be reporting section that the company owner could use it to create timesheets. So they could pick an employee and pick a date range and see, okay, this is how many hours Jeffrey worked in the last 2 weeks. So therefore, this is how much his paycheck is going to be. They could also use it to generate invoices for their clients. They could choose a client, see a list of all the timesheets that were recorded for that client over, let's say, a month, and then it would give them a total how much they should be charging the client for those hours. No, not in this class. Next semester. Yeah, but it's a good practice. As I said, you can build as much or as little of this. It's not an assignment. It's not for grades. But several people said, I'd like to practice, but I don't know how. So if there was something I could build that would give me practice, I would be interested in doing it. Okay. This was actually the very first time I hired a student on co-op. This was her first job because my company had no time tracking until we hired her. And suddenly I realized I was paying her by the hour. She wasn't on salary. So I needed a way to know what she was doing and that I could keep track of her hours. So I said, you're going to build your own time tracker. And then you're going to use it to log all of your hours. And then all the other students I subsequently hired, they would all log all their time through here. And then I would use it to bill my clients as well. Okay. And also one thing that you'll add, which we'll get into next week, is that it's a private site that a user would have to register and log in order to be able to see anything inside of it. It wouldn't be a public site where anybody could come to the site and see all of the project information in there. Okay. So this is in the assignments tab. It's something you can work on if you want extra practice. And if you're working on it, yes, of course, you can still ask me for help, even though it's not for marks. Okay? But this is a good chance for you to use what we're doing in class and do something else with it to feel that you're improving your skills and you're understanding better. Developing sites with PHP, it's no different a skill than anything else. It's like learning to play an instrument or starting a new sport. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. Right? The less you practice, the longer it's going to take to get good at it. So spending more time working with the technology is going to help you understand, fix your bugs faster, and become more and more comfortable. So that's here under assignments for anybody who's interested in doing it. Okay. So I'm going to open up, start my web server, and open up my code editor. And we want to open up our music library site. I'm just going to start my Apache web server. And I'm going to connect to our VPN so that my web pages can access my AWS database. My VPN connection's running, my web server's running. And I'll open up PHP Storm. We haven't actually looked at this site for a few weeks, so we may as well pull it up, see what's here. We can see what we've already done and then figure out what else we want to do with it. So we have basically 3 or 4 working pages here. We had our main page, which queries the database and uses a fetch all command to go and get all the musicians in the database and give us a list. We created a separate page, our details page, that has a form with a bunch of inputs. And we could use that for either adding a new record to the musicians table or for editing an existing record. So it's the same page that we're using for both purposes. And we also built a delete page. That was kind of a hidden page. It doesn't actually show any content. It just deletes that musician from the database and brings the user right back here. So with these 4 pages, 5 pages, we can create, we can read, we can update, and we could delete data. Doesn't really look like a functioning website. I mean, some of it does, but when we talked back on the very first day, we looked at a bunch of websites. We looked at Facebook, we looked at Amazon, we looked at Globe and Mail, and all of those sites, we said they had certain things in common in terms of how they were structured, if you remember. So we'll just pull up. One of the very first things we did back in January, we looked at these 3 sites. They're loading super duper slowly. And the question that I asked you, which we talked about, was we looked at the home pages of all three sites. And I asked you the question, what things change from one page to another, and what things kind of stay the same on all these sites? Yeah, so the header and navbar, Jeffrey, those change or those are the same? Right, so they all have one on the home page or on any page inside? Right, so once I go in, click on an article or look at a product, right? We're still going to get the same header at the top, same footer at the bottom, basically no matter where we are. It'll take me a while to get down here. Whatever. So this is one thing our site is missing, right? We want to have, now there's two ways we could do this. We could create a header with like a logo and a nav bar, and we could put that on every page. Or we could create a separate header, put it in its own file, and then link to it or include it in each one of our pages. Which one of those are we going to do? You did the first one last night? How'd that work out for you, Jeffrey? It's a mess. So Ivan, why are we going to do it the second way? Why do we want to build one header and one footer and just include them on every page? Right, absolutely. We want to have that information stored in one place. Well, yeah, and we don't, every time we create a new page, we don't want to have to repeat all of the code that would go in the header. So in much the same way that we've linked the style sheet in, or we linked in a JavaScript, we want to link in a separate header and separate footer. So if those things need to be updated, we only have one place we go to update them. We don't have to update all of our pages. So as much as possible when we're creating applications, we want to not repeat the same code over and over again. Right? We want to have it in one place and share it. So if we have to change it, we only have to change one file. We're not going to make the same change 10 times, 50 times, 500 times on a really big application. So we want to create a header and footer that'll appear here and here. And then if we make other pages as well, we want that shared header and footer. So that's one thing we want to share. If we look at the code, so here's my delete page. Here's the main musicians page with our HTML table. Here was my details page. Is there anything else that we've done repeatedly on each page where we've repeated the same code over and over again, and we might be better off to take that and put it in a separate file and just link to it? There's one thing in particular we've repeated in many places. Right, this database connection. So virtually every page in the site has the same exact database connection. So this isn't a great idea because it's possible my database connection might change. In fact, we have to change them, not regularly, but it is something we typically, we do sometimes. Why would we ever have to change the database connection? There's a few common causes where suddenly the old connection needs to get modified. Okay, so database gets hacked, right? We're going to change the credential, so we don't want to have to go into 50 pages and update that credential. Better off to have it in one place. What else might cause us to need to change our database connection? Right, we move it from, maybe we're not going to host on it, say AWS is too expensive. We want to go find a cheaper web host, so we're going to move it. Well, that server IP address isn't going to work for us anymore. And it's common, we do. Actually talking with a client, I have a client emailed me yesterday to say, call me, I want to set up a meeting because our host is too expensive. We want to find a new host. So if we do, we're going to have to change it. We also have to change it if people involved on the project change, right? So Maggie gets offered $250,000 a year to go work for Google. She says, it's been real, see you later. I'm moving to California. Well, if she's got access to the code, she still can go and change the database. So usually when somebody leaves the team, we're probably going to want to update, reset the password. So those are all common reasons why something in that connection might get changed. So it's terribly inefficient for us to have this code repeated in all these different files. Now, I did have a reason for repeating it in all these different files up until now, and that was because I wanted you guys to type this line a whole bunch of times. So you got used to doing it and you would become familiar with, this is what a PHP database connection looks like, And if it fails, I have some idea of how to fix it. Okay. So the idea is if it's wrong, we want to put this in a separate file. So we want to create a header file, we want to create a footer file, and we want to create a database connection file, and we want to share all of these in the pages we've already got. So let's start with a really simple header. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. So this isn't going to be a complete page. This is just going to be part of a page. So I'll make a new PHP file, and we'll call it header. We're basically breaking up the existing pages into components. We're going to have the main body of the page. We're going to have the header with the navigation bar and a footer with some kind of typical footer type content we might have. So we actually should get rid of some of the HTML in here, and we want to keep some of it. Which section should we keep? Which section should we get rid of? If this is going to be the header. All right. Well, this is going to be the header. So we want to embed this in all of the pages we've already got at the top. So what HTML should we remove from this file? I think we're going to want that. Sorry, Rebecca? Yeah. Okay, well, we will have to deal with the title. We'll have to modify that. We'll come back to that one in a minute. Keon, what do you think? Okay, well, we'll maybe keep the opening body tag because that can go at the top of every page. But what we want to get rid of are the closing tags because this file is going to go above all the code we already have in our musician pages. So let's get rid of that. We don't need it. Remind me to come back to the title because we'll need to get there. That'll be a little more complicated. So I'm going to go to my musicians page. So basically what I want to do is I want to replace all of this code here with my header. But before I get rid of this, I probably want to keep. So what should we do with our CSS link? Where would it make the most sense to put our CSS link tags? Right now we have them in every page. Where should they go instead? Yeah, we're going to put the links in the header. So again, if we want to modify those CSS links, we just have to open the header file. We don't have to go into each page. So I'm actually going to copy that CSS. I'm going to move that to the header instead. So now in our musicians page, everything, including the opening body tag, I'm going to remove. So now I've got two pieces of a page. Neither one of them is complete. This just has the content inside the body. All the HTML at the top of the page now lives in my shared header. So now we just need to use a simple PHP method to link the header in. So up at the top. And PHP gives us a few different, there's actually 4 different methods we could use. Any one of them will work. What's the name of the file we want to require here? So this is kind of like the PHP equivalent of an HTML link tag. We would use link to include CSS. We can use require, or in this case, we'll use require once. We're basically bringing in all the HTML that's in that header file, and it'll show up here. So we'll save that, and I'm going to reload the page in the browser, and then we can check how it looks. So I'll go back to my musicians page, and if I refresh, it actually looks exactly the same. So it's one complete page. The first nine lines now live in the header file. Everything underneath the body tag is in the musicians file. So it's a complete page when it gets served to the browser. So we want to do the same thing on our details page, and then we want to add a navigation bar into our header. So on my musician details, again, I'm going to delete everything from the body tag up. That stuff's going to come from our header file instead now. So we'll delete it. We've already got a PHP tag here. We'll replace that HTML with the HTML that comes from our header. Whoops, would help if I actually opened localhost version, sorry. So now I can open, both pages still work. So the pages still load fine in the browser. There's only one thing wrong. Rebecca, I'll pick on you because you mentioned it. What did I break? Right, the page title, we now have a little bit of an issue with the page title because before we had hard-coded the title into each file. But now the head section belongs to this header. So we no longer have a title here. So we'll want to fix this. So, and what we'll do here is we'll make our title is now going to be dynamic. Each page will set the title as a variable. So now on my musicians page and my musicians details page, we're going to need to set the value of a variable called title. So on this page, I'm going to give it a title of musicians. And on my musician detail page, I'll give it a value of maybe musician details. So it's important we set this variable before we include the header, because the header is expecting that there's a value called $title. So this line has got to happen before this one. Because this file, header.php, it's going to try to display a title variable. Let's see what this looks like. So if I refresh my list, it says musicians. But if I go here, I actually have an error, which is saying the variable title isn't defined. So I need to do the same thing on my musician details. Give that variable a value. It's working okay here now. So on my musician details, page title for that should make my error go away now. And we should have a proper page title on each page. So now I get my title showing up. So in every web application that you visit every day, the header code is never on every page. There's only one header, so we can change it in one place and one place only. So we want to add to this header. The first thing we want to have here is we want to create a navigation bar. And rather than create our own, we can use Bootstrap, because Bootstrap gives us all the HTML we need to have a mobile responsive nav bar that we can then put in our own links. So the code we need is linked on Blackboard. If you go into the Lesson 8 folder, if you open up this item, it says Bootstrap 4 navbar from W3 Schools. There's a whole bunch of different Bootstrap navbars. The one we want is partway down the page. There's a subheading called Collapsing the Navigation Bar. And I'm going to use that one because it's mobile responsive. So I'll open up that link. This one here, Bootstrap 4 navbar. So it shows you all kinds of samples. This one that includes a search. So I'm going to come down here. To this section where it has this subheading, Collapsing the Navigation Bar. And here's a sample nav bar that we're going to use. So I'm going to copy all of that. Yep. Bootstrap 3 is pretty old, hasn't been updated in several years. So I'm going to copy that whole block of code. It starts with the nav tag and ends with the end nav tag. So we'll copy that whole thing. Where should we paste this? Yeah, we're going to paste this into the header.php file, right underneath our body. So right here. So underneath body, I have my nav. And maybe I'll put a link to the source. So I'll just copy the tutorial URL. Good idea if we're going to use code we found somewhere else that we cite where it came from. So A, we're not trying to take credit for work we didn't do. And B, if we have problems with it later on and we need to modify it, we also, if we have to change this a year from now, we know where it came from. We can go back and look at the documentation. So sometimes those comments are also for us to be able to update our code later. Yeah, I want the collapsible nav bar. So now let's look at what this gives us. So if I refresh, we now have a full width navigation bar. We pick dark. If you want to change the color, you can change the color. And it's now embedded on both pages right away. Because we put the nav bar in the header, and each page requires the header. Whatever's in the header is now on all our pages. So now we can modify this a bit. I don't think we want it to say nav bar. If you really like that name. So I'm going to make a few changes here. So this first link that says nav bar, I'll have it say COMP1006 music library. I'm going to change that first link. Go to musicians.php. Well, the easiest thing is link to Bootstrap in the header and include the header on each page. That's what we've done here, right? So our header uses Bootstrap and each page will use the header. Yeah, it's the same. So my first link will say view all and go to musicians. My second link will go to musician details. We'll say add new. We'll leave the third link for now. Next week, this will become a register link, and we'll also add a login link. One step at a time. I've added these two links, and now if I go back and refresh, my nav bar, instead of saying link 1 and link 2, the first link should say view all, and the second link should say add new, and I should now be able to move from one page to the next using my navigation bar. We'll just try it out. So when I click view all, we get our list. And when we click add new, we get our form for adding a new record. And because the nav bar is shared, any change we make to the header, it shows up automatically on all the pages that use our header. Now, typically, we didn't really build a homepage for this site. There isn't one. Usually when we click the logo or the main name of the site, where does that typically take us? So that's a link. What'll happen if I click this? Yeah, it'll typically, the expected behavior is it'll take us back to the homepage. So we don't actually have a homepage for this site, but maybe we'll make a quick homepage, and then clicking this link will take us to the homepage. That'll describe what is our site all about. So we'll make a new file, and we'll want to include the header on there as well. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. Typically, the homepage is called index. If we don't specify any page, this is the page that our server will load. Create a new file called index. What I'll do on here is I'll just put in a description of what this site is and what technologies we're using. That way, if you have a similar explanation and you want to show this site in an employer, here's to an employer, when you're interviewing for co-op jobs, here's a PHP site I built, they can come here and the homepage will tell them what the site is. I'll put in a link to my GitHub repository where all the code is. So you could put in the link to your own GitHub repository. So I'm just going to get the link from my repository and put it on the home page. You can say whatever you want. You don't have to copy my text word for word. Say whatever you want about your website. You can say, I hate this website, but Rich is making me do it, so I get my credit. Say whatever you want. So now if I go to my, I don't even need to put the URL index.php. That's the default, so it loads automatically. Now, what do we have to do in order to make the home page look like the rest of the site? Notice there's no CSS, there's no navigation bar. We can fix that easily. How could we fix that? Yeah, we can add the header, which includes Bootstrap and includes our nav bar. So what lines of code should we take out and replace with the header? Ivan? Yeah, everything from here up we can take out because we'll replace that with our header instead. And I need to set the page title first. So this page will also use our header with our navigation bar and our links to the Bootstrap style sheet. So if you go back and refresh, this page should now look like all the other pages. Shrink mine down. So here it is with no header. And now it looks like my other pages. However, when I click on my site name in my nav bar, it doesn't go anywhere. So we're going to have to make one more change, right? This link works and this link works, but when I click COMP1006 music library, I want that to take me back to our new home page. When I click it, nothing happens. So we have to go back to our header where the nav bar is and change that first link. It looks like a link, but it doesn't actually go anywhere right now. So in our header, here's my first link. It has this class of navbar brand. It means makes the font white rather than gray, and it enlarges the font size. So what should we change the href to? Okay, so this link, go to our index page. So when we click on that first link in the navigation bar, it takes us to the site homepage. So now I click here. Whoops, sorry, that slash shouldn't be there. Index.php without the slash. So I can go to my form, I can go to my list, and now I click on home. So now it's starting to look like an actual web application. It has some branding, it has a home page, and we've given users a consistent navigation from one page to another. And when we need to make changes to it, we just have to change the header. We don't have to go into every page and change something. So our header, obviously we can put anything we want in there. We've just put a Bootstrap navigation bar and a link to Bootstrap CSS. If we wanted to create our own CSS, again, we could create our own style sheet and we could just include it in the header. Let's say we want to do something like, maybe we want to override, maybe we don't like that, what colors are, we don't like this black nav bar, so we want to make it our own. Let's do that. So it has a class of BG dark and navbar dark. So we could create our own style sheet. We could override those classes, and then we can include our own style sheet. So we're still using Bootstrap, but we're going to customize it. So we'll go ahead and maybe we'll make our own quick style sheet. So I have a CSS folder already with the Bootstrap style sheet. I'm going to make a new style sheet. I'll call it styles.css. The name isn't important. You can call your style sheet anything you like. So I want to override that black background with a different color of my own. So pick any color. I'm going to make it a dark blue instead. Or I would pick up, if I was doing this for a client, I'd pick one of the colors in their logo and make sure it matched their branding. So now we want to include this style sheet in our header as well. So it uses Bootstrap, but it also uses our own styles. So in your header, where you've got the link to Bootstrap, we want to add a second CSS link, but this time now linking to our own style sheet. Many, many sites will do this. They'll use Bootstrap for some basic layout and formatting, and because it makes our site mobile responsive automatically. But then we'll customize it with our own fonts, colors, whatever look and feel, whatever branding our application should have. We'll put in our own style sheet, and we'll include both of them. Okay, that didn't work. Let's see why. Oh, it may be because we set the color background color instead of the color. Let's see. I can't tell if it's changed colors or not, so I'll make it something more noticeable for a minute. Let's see. Well, it is, I think, on the navbar collapse. Okay, I have to think about that for a minute. Okay, we may have to come back to this one. I'll have to think about that. There's a few different ways we can solve it. I'll have to think about that one. Well, I still want Bootstrap. I'm gonna see if I put our style sheet first. Okay. Actually, well, we've got the link here, so let's see what it tells us. For the colors, colored navbar. Use any of the .dg color classes. But that'll again only give us Bootstrap colors. I wonder if I take navbar star. Won't spend too much time on getting the color. I'll figure it out. Yeah, that changes that. Okay, I'll have to think about that one a little more. We'll figure it out. I may have to come up, show the solution for that one next week. Okay. So we'll come back to that. The other thing I wanted to add at the bottom, so we have our header. We will make some more adjustments to the header, like I said, next week. Because eventually we want to register and login link over here. And when a user signs up and logs in, we want those links to disappear and we want to show their email address and log out. And typically we'd expect those over on the top right of our nav bar. So we'll do that next week. I also want, just like the Globe and Mail has, or I think I closed Amazon, I want to have a simple footer that's also shared on all the pages at the bottom. So we typically have things like a copyright statement, maybe a link to a privacy policy. Those kinds of things we'll typically want to put in a footer. So we're going to create a really simple, much simpler than our header, simple footer and embed that at the bottom. So we'll make one more new file, new PHP file. We'll call this one footer.php. So this is going to go below all of the body content on each page. It'll get embedded at the bottom. So again, much like our header, we don't want all of this HTML because this is a full page. So what should we remove from the footer? Sorry, well, we want to keep those or remove them? Right. All of this stuff we can get rid of because we already have that in the header. And we don't want to repeat those tags. We can only have them once. So for our footer, I found a nice Bootstrap 4 footer we can use. That's linked here, next item on Blackboard. So this is kind of a useful site for doing design with Bootstrap. mdbootstrap.com. So this is using the material design guidelines by Google along with Bootstrap to give a, someone's not a fan of material design for Bootstrap. So here's a footer. A basic footer. So we want this one. So not the first one, but this basic one that says copyright. So it'll give us a footer that looks kind of like this. So I'm going to copy this little block of code. So not the first sample footer that has all of this stuff with navigation, just this simple one at the bottom. So I'll copy that code. And I'll paste it in here. And I'll also maybe put a comment. So again, I know where this footer came from. So I'll just copy that URL. Comment. Having this little copyright symbol is okay. Ideally, this should be encoded HTML. Ampersand copy, that will generate the copyright symbol in HTML. And I'm just going to put the copyright . We'll see how that looks. It's using a blue background. So what we want to do is we want to embed this footer at the bottom of our home page, the bottom of our musicians page, and at the bottom of the musician details page. All three pages should have the same footer at the bottom. So we want to open up each of those three files and replace the end body and end HTML tags by embedding our footer. So just like we use require once for the header, we want to use require once for the footer at the bottom. So I'm going to first open up my home page because it's the cleanest. So we notice my code editors, it's complaining that we have these closing body and HTML tags because the opening body and opening HTML tags aren't in this file, doesn't know where they are. That's okay. So I'm going to remove those inside of PHP. I'll require the footer. So that should give us the footer on the home page. And if this is successful, I'll want to do the same thing on my details page and on my musicians page. So now we get a footer at the bottom. I know it's not anchored to the bottom of the page. I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. We'll want to move that probably to the footer as well, right? We have it here on the musicians page. We've got a link. So yeah, it would make sense to move that any JavaScript links to the footer. So that way we add a new page and embed the footer, it automatically has access to all our JavaScript. So that's a good idea, Jeffrey. So on my musicians page, I'm actually going to cut that, move it. So now all the pages will have access to our JavaScript file. So in my musicians page, same thing. I could just do that. And I'll also want to include it at the bottom of musician details. And then I think I want to make 1 or 2 changes to the footer. So I'll save that. And at the bottom, musician details, same thing. Open a set of PHP tags and embed my footer. So each page now only has the content for that page in between the shared header and footer. So we have our header at the top, all of our logic and content in the middle, footer at the bottom. I'm just going to check this in my browser. So now we can go to home. So all pages have my footer. Maybe my background didn't work, so that's fine. We can just open up the footer. This blue didn't work. I think if we use the, let's see, we use the BG info. That should give us a light blue background. Background info. Okay, wasn't quite the color I was going for, but that's okay. It'll do for now. So changing that one file, that page, just like changing your CSS, if it's linked into every page, that change is shared among all the pages. So maintaining our site is much easier. Then I say I don't like info. Let's try a different color. Maybe I like this color. I don't know. We can play around with it. Probably better before. But it's in one place. Or again, maybe I want to give it my own color. So maybe I'll create my own class. I'll create a BG footer class. And then I'll define a color for this, try and define the color in my own style sheet. Maybe I want a light blue footer that Bootstrap doesn't offer, so I'll create my own color. We'll see if that works. So I just created a definition for that class in my own style sheet. So we're using a combination of Bootstrap styling and some custom styling of our own. I'll fix this up for next week because I want to change my nav bar. And because we use the collapsible menu, if we size our window appropriately, right, Bootstrap gives us, we'll have to add a little Bootstrap jQuery to make our menu pop down. We can do that next week as well. But the little collapsible menu is here because we used in our header, we used the collapsible navigation bar here. So all the sites we visit every day, they're actually put together like this. It's not a series of complete pages. Each page is its own file with its own logic and content with a whole bunch of shared elements. And the two most common shared elements would be a header and a footer. There might even be a sidebar, a left or right sidebar, or both that are shared on each page. So we've used the require function today for this. Sorry, we've used require once. There's similar functions. There's also a similar function called include. It works the same way. If we replaced require with the word include, it's going to work the same. The differences are minor. We can talk about them next week, what the differences are. So you could use require or include. Require is generally recommended. We'll look at why next week. So we'll want to do a little bit more with this next week. We've created the header and footer. One thing we talked about doing, which we didn't get to, was we need a way to also share this piece. We have this database connection repeated in file after file. We want to move that connection to its own file that we can just require. So if we have to change those credentials, we only have to change it in one place rather than changing all the instances. So next week, because a lot of today's class was our lab, there won't be any quiz next week. So we're going to want to do, but I'm going to ask you to please try to be on time, because next week we're going to want to deal with this, the sharing of the database connection, and then we want to start working on security and authentication. Okay? So there's two reasons why I want you to be here and I want you to be on time. One, there's a fair bit we need to do in order to implement security. And two, obviously, it's a really important responsibility if we're building websites to make sure that we're building them securely. Okay? So the topic is a very important topic for us to cover. Okay, so no quiz. We'll start with that right at 11 o'clock next week. If you haven't finished your lab, you do have until 5 o'clock tomorrow to submit it. Okay. I'm also going to give out assignment 2 next week as well. At least I hope to give it out next week. Okay, that's all for today. Have a good week.